All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Friday, October 25th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. You are listening to All in Horns, and this is our prediction episode where we will give you the keys to victory for the Texas Longhorns taking on the number 25 ranked Vanderbilt Commodores. And we will give you the Saturday slate of games coming up this weekend. It's a good one and a big impact coming up this weekend on what could be an elimination Saturday for some teams, or the start of a sweet victory run into the college football 12-team playoffs this year. And I think a lot of people, Jake, just speaking mindset on college football playoffs, I think a lot of people are just not realizing the possibility. Right now, there are 6 SEC teams that have one loss? Something along, like, I think half the field right now could technically be in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. I'll pull it up real quick. Put me on the spot here.
Sorry, but yeah, I think there's only one. There's
there's 6-1 teams in the SEC. You also have 2 5-2 teams.
Right.
And neither one of them would technically be eliminated. Vanderbilt, one of those, by the way, if they went out with their schedule, they would be in.
Right.
Not likely to happen, but as of right now, you can't eliminate them. Alabama, another 5-2 team that would get in if they won out. And so this is why, I went on that rant way earlier in the year about we're midway through the season, and there's probably still around 20 teams at least, if not more, when you start adding in those G5 teams that are fighting for a spot, that are all still fighting to go into the playoffs. Normally by this time, we'd be down to probably about 8 or 9 teams. That's like, okay, these are the ones who are competing for the 4 spots in the playoffs.
Yeah,
and not even to mention, it's probably 30-something schools, because you had the Big 12, that is a big old cluster, and you have the ACC where several teams are still alive as well, and then obviously the Big 10 and the SEC, as we just discussed, you have automatic bids in this system. Yeah. So there are a ton of teams still playing for their playoff lives right now, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and I was gonna, when you said 20, I was immediately gonna be like, it's probably closer to 30, because like you said, Jake, I mean, think about where the Big 12 is right now, and how it is anybody could beat anybody conference on any given Saturday. I mean, a Baylor could beat BYU one weekend, and a Texas Tech could beat an Iowa State. And I don't know if these teams have played each other already or haven't played. I'm just giving examples as to it is an any given Saturday type of conference in the Big 12, and your Big 12 champion, who gets an automatic bid to one of the top 4 seeds, could be a 2-loss, maybe even 3-loss team at some point. Maybe not this year. It could be this year, but at some point in time, you're looking at that. And now you're looking, wait a second, could there be a G5 team that gets an automatic bid that could be one of those top 4 teams one year? Maybe a Boise State goes undefeated and they're a top 5-6 team in the country. We don't know what that looks like quite yet. It hasn't played out that way yet. We haven't even gotten into, Jake, the Army-Navy dilemma that could play out this season. Both teams undefeated. Navy playing Notre Dame. We're actually going to touch base on that game, so we're not going to give too much away right now. Hypothetically speaking, Army-Navy both play Notre Dame. They get through Notre Dame. They get through the rest of their season undefeated. They would then play the conference championship game against each other before the Army-Navy game is played. The winner of that game probably goes to the playoffs, and then they play each other a second time for the Army-Navy game. That essentially wouldn't mean anything other than bragging rights, but say the loser of that conference game wins that second game, there's just a whole bunch of chaos, just a ton of chaos. And so that is why the 12-team playoff to me is special. Now, I didn't mean to go on that rant, but I just felt like people haven't really kind of fully committed to this 12-team playoff idea yet. And I'm bought in. I was sold as soon as they announced it.
Yeah, I've been wanting it since I was like 10 years old. I never understood why there wasn't a playoff system for college football. And not only that, there's another thing in this. It's kind of been assumed the Big 12 would get one, maybe two teams. Well, that they could get more. Iowa State's undefeated. BYU's undefeated. K-State's 6-1. You could get if you have 3 or 4 Big 12 teams with like one loss, there's a good chance they're going to get a few in. I think the committee would probably try not to just make it an all SEC, all Big 10, and the SEC lost a lot of non-conference games this year to, LSU being top 10 in the country, number 1 in the SEC. They lost to USC, who just lost Minnesota. They've lost several games now. And so it's going to be very interesting as these playoff rankings start to come out. And I know we're going to have a lot of discussion over this next week, so we don't have to dive too far into weeds.
Right.
I think we're going to have probably a couple episodes where there is extended playoff talk, because I don't think a lot of people understand just how crazy this is right now and just how many important games there are every week, including one we're going to talk about later tonight that we probably wouldn't have talked about in previous years in a Boise State UNLV.
Well, not only that, but Jake, speaking on your point about getting Big 12 teams in, ACC teams in, the contract for the 12-team playoff is up, I believe, in 2026. They're going to revisit the whole playoff situation. They need votes from the commissioners of all conferences in play to keep the format the way it is now. If the Big 12 feels like they're getting screwed out of playoff spots because 8 SEC teams made it and 4 Big 10 teams made it, they're not going to vote on getting another 12-team playoff. They're not going to vote on it. The ACC is also going to vote against it. So I do think the committee, they're not total idiots. There's going to be politics played into it that would be like, all right, look, if there are 2 Big 12 teams that are deserving, say, 2 undefeated teams go into the Big 12 championship game, they might both get an automatic spot into the playoffs. And then say there's a 1-loss team that didn't get in, that could be another at-large bid that gets in for the Big 12. That would make it three Big 12 teams. I think the commissioner of the Big 12 would be satisfied at that point. Same with the ACC. Those scenarios are going to be played out, and people are just going to have to get accustomed to that's kind of the new college football format.
Yeah, and I'm not going to dive into this, but just to mention it, to tease for next week and why you're going to want to listen during the bye week, there's also a lot of talk that the SEC and the Big 10 want more automatic bids. So in 2026, I think we might be looking at a 16-team playoff, and we'll talk about that next week. But I have a lot of thoughts on the system and a lot of the talks that are going on between the 4 major conferences and all the different twists and turns that this could take over these next few years, and especially going into 2026. We know what it is for this year and next year, but there's a lot to talk about for this year's playoff. There's a lot of talk to talk about for the future of the college football playoffs and the college football landscape that we're going to really dive into next week during the bye.
Well, and again, more talk on the bye week. We're teasing a lot for the bye week. We're trying to make sure that you stay tuned even when Texas isn't playing. We just make sure you stay tuned to All In Horns. Jake, there's a lot of tiebreakers that aren't going to be decided on the field in a lot of these conferences. We're not doing East versus West, North versus South within the conference and the divisions. It's just an open conference now. There are no winners of the South, winners of the North play in the conference championship game. No, there's 16 teams in these conferences. You don't play 16 games in a season. So some of these teams, there's going to be 4 teams that could possibly in a tiebreaker that never played each other. And you don't have a head-to-head. And you're going to have to figure that out.
And there are some tiebreaker scenarios where you get down past the 5th and 6th option. There is a very small, very, very small chance you could have a coin flip decide who goes to a conference championship game. And that'd be like watching the Friday Night Lights TV show where they do the coin flip, like at a gas station or something, and announce it on the radio. They could make a whole show out of that coin flip.
Oh my God. They'd sell it. They'd sell it to ESPN. They do an hour-long special on it. You know they would. The flip. The decision.
The flip, like the decision.
Yeah.
We've already gone on too long about this, but it's just there's a lot to discuss about this topic that we're going to dive into next week, and a lot that is pretty exciting, and why why there's so many more games that matter now compared to previous years.
Yeah, and it keeps us in tune with Saturdays, and it makes every Saturday game that much more important. And so, Jake, let's get into the reason why everybody's here today. Number 5, Texas takes on number 25, Vanderbilt, a ranked matchup in Nashville. And Jake, we've got some keys to victory for the Texas Longhorns. And a lot of people might think, yeah, these are pretty obvious ones. Some of them are, okay? We're just going to admit it. Some of them are pretty obvious, but you got to execute when you got to execute, and that's going to get
They're
Texas
obvious
the win.
for a reason.
You're exactly right. Tanner's keys to victory, my number 1 is bottle up Pavia. I mean, that's very, very essential in Texas winning this game. Is if you can bottle him up, he's going to get some yards. He's going to convert some third downs. He's going to extend some plays. He's going to use his legs and, work sideline to sideline and make some guys miss. That's just the type of player he is. But if you can bottle him up for the most part, put a spy on him, then you should be good to go. That is one of the keys for the defense to have success. Get the old Quinn back. I want the old Quinn back, baby. That's what this is a get right game for Quinn, not for the Texas Longhorn team, because I don't think you can get a get right game against a ranked opponent. That's just not how college football works. Vanderbilt's too good of a team to be a get right game. It is a get right situation for Quinn. Quinn's got to get his rhythm back. He's got to get back into the offense. And the offense as a whole runs through a Quinn Ewers to make sure everything is running smoothly. And then lastly, complimentary football. When you get a good 15, 20-yard return, no holding penalties. When you get a third down conversion, no false starts, no holding from a wide receiver or a tight end. If you make a stop on third down on defense, don't commit a face mask penalty. Like, come on, guys, compliment each other. If the defense gets a turnover, offense, turn it into points. If the offense is going and scoring points, defense, get a couple stops. Play complimentary football. That's going to be huge for Texas in this game. If they can compliment each other on each side of the ball and not shoot themselves in the foot, they'll be fine. They'll take care of business. And so those are the 3 biggest things for me, Jake.
Yeah, especially that turnover point, by the way, because if you look at the Georgia-Texas game, it was 4 turnovers to 3. But Georgia, I believe, had 13 more points off of turnovers. Most of those because they started in Texas territory, and all they had to do was kick a field goal after not going anywhere. And while the Texas offense just sputtered out, the only points they had off a turnover was the Jahdae Barron interception return that got them inside the 10-yard line. But my keys to victory, as always, a tried and true classic from me, offensive line domination. This Vanderbilt defense isn't great. I expect Texas to be able to run the ball fairly consistently. And I want to see this offensive line play a little bit pissed off, especially a Cam Williams and a DJ Campbell who really struggled. And even a Kelvin Banks, who's kind of had his name dragged a little bit until some actual people who know football watched it. And I say this as someone who said after the game that he didn't play well, then watched it and was like, I'm dumb. He did play really well. He gave up 2 pressures the entire game. And one of those was not his fault. It was the quarterback's fault. So I want to see the O-line go out, dominate this game. Quinn shouldn't get touched. Give him some time to get his confidence going. That also starts at the offensive line by protecting him. Third downs. That's going to be my next one. The third down offense have been really good this year and against some good defenses. It has been sputtering a little bit in these last 2 games. And a lot of that goes to Quinn. That goes to your second point of bring the old Quinn back. We need to see Quinn play like he did pre-injury, play with confidence and sling it around a little bit, especially in that intermediate range. His intermediate passing is all of a sudden for the first time in his career is just gone these last 2 weeks. Need to see that come back. And then something I talked about a lot in yesterday's episode, discipline from the edges against the option game. This is the most unique offense they've played against. It provides a completely different scheme than they have seen. And it's really the only scheme to this level that they're going to see like this. You're going to have your edges and you're going to throw the linebackers in there. Play very disciplined, play patient, and do their job, not try to make the flash plays. I'm going to be watching the edges early to see if they are just overrunning and allowing Pavia to get outside, or, whatever type of concept of option that Vanderbilt is running. See if those edges are playing it like they're supposed to and trusting their other teammates to be where they're supposed to be. This is very much a trust your teammates type game for this defense, and it's going to be all about discipline.
100%, Jake. All right, with all that being said, my keys to victory, your keys to victory, prediction time, Jake. Let's go ahead, start with some individual performers predictions, and then we'll move to score, and then we'll move to the rest of the country and some big games across the nation. Jake, individual predictions, who do you got?
I think Jaden Blue is going to be the offensive MVP for the Longhorns. I think this is going to be a big game for him. I thought he looked good against Georgia. He's probably a little bit ticked off that he didn't see the ball more. I think Sarkisian is going to make it a point to get him the ball more in this game, especially with Wisner being a little bit banged up. He's listed as probably going to play, but I think we're going to see a little bit more Jaden Blue this week. So give me him for offensive MVP. On the defensive side, give me Barron Sorrell. He is becoming very underappreciated. He has a top 3 pressure rate in the SEC right now. He is the highest pressure rate of any edge for Texas. Not a ton of sacks, but he's constantly pressuring. He has several big tackles for loss, including against Georgia, where they tried the little jet touch pass that works really well in College Football 25, and he just swallowed that up. I think the style of football that Sorrell plays is going to match up really well in this game. And I think he's going to have 3 or 4 tackles for loss. Maybe he gets a sack in this game, forces a fumble. I think he's going to have a big time game.
Well, Jake, I'm going to give a little bit of an injury report update for those who haven't been caught up, and if we haven't mentioned it already. Last we saw Isaiah Bond questionable going into this game. If he's not 100%, I think Quinn Ewers is going to need someone to throw the ball to. I think Gunnar Helm, the safety security blanket for this Texas offense, is a great person to be that guy for Quinn Ewers in this game. Intermediate, 7-8 yard curls, flats, whatever you need. Gunnar Helm should be there. I think he gets, I'm actually going to call a 2 touchdown performance for Gunnar Helm with, say, about 6 or 7 catches on the day, maybe in between that 80 to 100 yard range. I think he's going to pop off one big one. He typically does, but I think he finds the end zone twice in this Vanderbilt game. I wanted to go Quinn. I did want to go Quinn. I hope Quinn has a good game. I want Quinn to have a big game. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go Anthony Hill. That might be low-hanging fruit, but I think this is going to be a huge game for the linebackers. Him or LaFau are going to have to be huge. Even a David Benda, I think they're going to have to be very eye-disciplined in this game. You talk about the edges being disciplined in this type of scheme. Whoever's spying the quarterback, whoever has that responsibility of following, and you might do a double spy. You might have one guy over here, one guy over here working on Pavia. And so whoever that might be, whether that is LaFau, a Hill, or a Benda, which I'm going to go ahead and say Hill's going to make more plays. I'm gonna say Anthony Hill, give him a sack and maybe a fumble recovery while we're at it. So, Jake, final score predictions.
I've thought about this one for a while. The spread, I think it opened at like 19.5. It's down to 18.5 last time I checked. I'm not going to pick Texas to cover the spread. I think Vandy will cover it late in the game. I think Vandy's going to have some success early. I think they're going to, this is my bold prediction. I think Vandy scores on their first 2 offensive drives. And I think the offense for Texas kind of keeps them afloat from falling down early and maybe starting to get in their heads. Then I think Texas kind of pulls away and Vandy covers late. Give me Texas 37-24.
37-24. All right. Oh, man. Yeah, I have a similar feeling, at least with the running game for Vanderbilt. I just feel like they're going to come out and they're going to execute a game plan that they've got scripted. And I think those scripted plays are going to work well for Vanderbilt's offense, at least to come out early in this one. I'm not sure if Sark wants to try to be the aggressor and maybe put his offense on the field early in this one and maybe try to get that opening possession. I'm going to go with, Vanderbilt scoring maybe 10 points in the first quarter, and then getting held in check for the majority of the game. I think they moved the ball down the field perfectly fine. I think they're going to be aggressive and going for it on, say, fourth down if they're on their own side of the field and whatnot. So I think Texas gets a couple stops on downs as well. I'm going to go ahead and say a 40-17 victory for the Texas Longhorns. And I think the game is closer than what that score indicates. I think Texas just pulls away maybe the final 2 possessions of the game or something like that. They ended up putting it in the end zone or something along those lines. A couple late scores for Texas to put it away. All right, Jake, that's going to do it for Texas Vanderbilt talk for this week. Let's go ahead and look across the country at some big games, and then including tonight's game. Number 17, Boise State, 3.5-point favorites over UNLV. That game being played in Las Vegas. UNLV, earlier in the season, for those who don't remember, starting quarterback sitting out the remainder of the year due to NIL disagreements with the program. Starting running back also sitting out for the remainder of the season. They have managed to continue to put on a tremendous season and are still in the hunt for this G5 seeding in the college football playoffs. They play tonight. It is 5-1 Boise State taking on 6-1 UNLV, both undefeated in conference play in the Mountain West. Boise State 3.5-point favorites. This game kicks off at 9:30. What are your thoughts on the game?
I'm not going to bet against Boise State right now. Their one loss is a 3-point loss, last second field goal on the road against Oregon. Number 1 team in the nation, by the way, and the team I picked to win the national championship in our first week of episodes. So I think pretty highly of Boise State. I think they're humble brag there. I think Boise State is a team that could win a playoff game this year. That's how highly I think of them right now. So I think Boise State's going to win this. I think they're going to put some style points on it. I am betting Boise State in this game. I love that spread. I think Boise State wins this game by 2 or 3 possessions. And maybe it doesn't even look that close when you actually watch the game. And I'm all aboard the Michael Myers. If you haven't seen Ashton Jeanty, he just stands straight up. Jeanty, okay. And he just stands straight up in the backfield. He wore a Michael Myers Halloween outfit the other day to be fun because he saw people talking about that. I'm all aboard his hype train. Him and Travis Hunter, the Heisman leaders for me. So give me Boise State big.
You're a damn good running back or just a damn good influential player when you're a college football player. That typical kickoffs are around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and you're influencing NFL players to run like you. Jamar Gibbs had the same standing up straight still game against Minnesota this last week, scored a touchdown on it, a big touchdown, like a 45, 50-yard touchdown run, and did the Ashton Jeanty. And so, you're putting an influence on the game. You're putting your footprint on the game if you got NFL players not mocking you, but
paying respect.
Essentially, yeah. They're modeling their game after you. So I'm with you, Jake. I think Boise State rolls in this one. And I'm going to say by 2 or 3 possessions as well.
And I did want to mention with this, just since it's a G5, we talked about battling for a playoff spot. One of the teams that a lot of people thought was going to go undefeated and make things difficult for the committee fell the other night. Liberty, who was 5-0, lost to 0-6 Kennesaw State, their first win as an FBS program. So just one thing I wanted to at least mention, because that was a huge upset. Really cool for Kennesaw State to get their first win.
And Liberty had to win that game because they have
they have to go undefeated with their schedule.
Yeah, very weak schedule. So, Jake, this is going to be a really fun one. Like I said, there's a lot of fun games this Saturday. This Saturday slate is a great slate of games. Number 12 Notre Dame will be playing Navy at MetLife Stadium. That's a ranked game, people. Number 12 Notre Dame, 13-point favorites over 24 ranked Navy. The Shipmen. Can Navy get it done?
My uncle was in the Navy. I'm going to take Navy to win this game outright. My upset special of the week. Northern Illinois ran it down Notre Dame's throat, and that's exactly what Navy is going to do in this game. I do not have a ton of confidence in this pick, but I want to see Navy go undefeated. I want to see Army go undefeated. I want the chaos in college football. Notre Dame is not world beaters. Obviously, they lost to Northern Illinois at home a week after beating A&M. And so give me Navy to pull this game out in MetLife and really start to get the college football world to start talking about the hype up for a possible Navy Army conference championship game to decide a playoff spot.
Jake, this Navy offense is putting up points. They're averaging, I want to say, around 44 points per game. Horvath is the leading passer. He's the leading rusher. I'm surprised he's not the leading receiver as well. He's got 10 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns. Give me the Navy midshipman in a win over Notre Dame. And that's not even my upset special this week, Jake. I think it's going to be a wild week this week. I'm all in on the Naval Academies. I'm going Navy in against Notre Dame for the exact same reasons you did. I think they're going to control the clock. I think they're going to control the ground game. I think they're going to win against Notre Dame. And honestly, I think I could kind of see them taking it to them towards the end of the game. I think it'll be close all the way through. If they get a couple big plays that spark, this is not just your old school Navy team that keeps it within 24 points. This team is almost putting up 45 points a game this year.
Yeah, I mean, they played Memphis, who's a pretty solid, program in football earlier this year and had almost 600 yards of offense. Now, they also gave up 600 yards, but they won that game. I think it was 56-44. If their defense can just if they can stop the run at all, I think Navy could run away with this game, but that's a big if because their defense is pretty suspect. But when you can look forward this much to a Notre Dame Navy game, you're having a fun year in college football.
It's been a great one. All right, Jake, this is a large spread for a ranked game and a conference game at that. Not a lot of people know that, but yes, Oregon's in the Big Ten now. Illinois, also a Big Ten team. Number 20, Illinois at number 1, Oregon, one of the better atmospheres in all of college football. 21.5-point favorites for the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, I do not like the spread. I don't think Illinois is as good as their record. I don't think they're a top 25 team in the country. They've played one good team in Penn State, and that was a terribly boring game to watch. I think Penn State won 21-7. I think Oregon's going to win this game. I think Illinois covers. I'll pick them to cover. Oregon's kind of due to have a one of those games where they just kind of barely get by. I honestly thought their Purdue game was kind of disappointing for them. Not the defensive side shutting them out, but the offense only scoring 35 points. So Oregon's kind of been a weird team this year where Dylan Gabriel will have like 2 incomplete passes and 400 yards and they'll score 30 points. And you would expect it to be 50 to 60 points. So I think Oregon wins this game handily. I don't think it's ever close, but I do think I do think Illinois covers.
I'm with you. I think Illinois is not a good team. By the way, quick shout out. Great helmets. I don't care what anybody said. Last week, they had phenomenal uniforms with the throwbacks to like the 1920 Leatherhead helmets. Those were fantastic. Did you see how long it took for each one of those helmets to be painted? It was like a 10-hour process for each one of those individual helmets to be painted. And I thought those were awesome. They look great.
And it's not something they're wearing every week. It was a one-time alternate to throw back to try to make it look like the leather helmets. And I think it was because it's their 100th anniversary or whatever is a football program. I didn't get people being like, these are an atrocity. It's like they kind of pulled off the look. It looked like leather helmets when you were just looking from afar. And I thought it was cool to see something like that. I didn't have an issue with it either. You and I were on the same page. Everyone else was freaking out about it.
I thought it was pretty cool, to be completely honest with you. I think Oregon takes this one pretty handedly. I don't think it's ever in doubt for a second. I think Illinois is going to make it somewhat close going into the fourth quarter. And when I say close, I'm talking like a 14, 20-point game covering the spread. I think Oregon jumps out and wins by maybe 4 or even 5 possessions in this one. I think they steamroll them. All right, real quick, Jake, BYU at UCF. This one to me is very interesting. I looked at it and I was shocked UCF was favored in this one at home over the undefeated BYU Cougars. but coming off of they're coming off of a long week. I believe they played Friday night against Oklahoma State a week ago. Oklahoma State struggling in the Big 12. They're struggling this year, which is odd to see. Oklahoma State very easily could have won that game. It took last-second heroics by BYU at home to win that game. So maybe that's why UCF is, favored to win this thing. I really want to take the Knights to win this one. I'm gonna have fun with it. I'm taking UCF, baby. I think BYU is good. They're just bound to fall. It just seems like the perfect slip-up week.
Having fun with it by picking the favorite.
Oh yeah,
they're the favorite. I think BYU.
I'm picking a 4-loss team. I'm picking a 4-loss team to beat an undefeated team. Is what I'm doing.
They did just almost knock off Iowa State last week, so that is worth mentioning. UCF did. Yeah. I'm taking BYU. I think it's a little disrespectful to make them now that they're not favorites for a reason, because they look like they should have lost some games. But BYU is a kind of a magical season going on. Every time you think they're going to lose, they find a way to win. They've, that K-State game, if you look at the box score, you're like, how did they win by that much? But they just find ways.
It's special teams
Retzlaff at quarterback, BYU back at quarterback. Give me the Cougar magic to continue this undefeated season.
I like it. Jake, number 21, Mizzou at Bama. I think Mizzou is one of the most fraudulent teams in the country this year. The fact that they are 6-1, but also they're at the ranking that they are probably for a reason. 6-1, they're 2-1 in the SEC. They got steamrolled by Texas A&M. I think Alabama has something to prove. Very rarely, if ever, do you see Bama losing 2 games in a row. I think they're catching Mizzou. I think Mizzou's catching Bama at a really bad time right now. Give me Bama by 3 touchdowns.
Bama 56-17. This is going to be ugly. I think Bama's going to take a lot of frustrations out. I don't think Mizzou's a good football team. They should have lost last week to Auburn, and Auburn tries to give games away to people. I think this game's going to get even uglier than that A&M game got, which is the game that kind of exposed Mizzou as frauds, because that's the only team with a pulse they've played this year.
And Jake, maybe the game of the week. Number 8 LSU, undefeated in conference play, taking on number 14 Texas A&M Aggies, also the only other undefeated SEC team. These two top of the conference taking on in a primetime game, with A&M being 2.5-point favorites in this one. Jake, what are your thoughts on it?
I almost don't want to pick this. I think I've picked every A&M game wrong this year, other than maybe the Florida game. I've tried to play mind games with it. That hasn't worked. I picked them to beat Notre Dame, and that kind of flustered me because they looked terrible in that game. I have gone from picking LSU to picking A&M to picking LSU in my mind. I think it's really going to come down to who can screw up the least. Ironically, we want A&M to win this game, technically, because Texas doesn't play LSU, so they don't control that side. They would obviously not get in. If LSU went undefeated and Georgia stayed with 1 loss, Texas would not be in the SEC title game. So technically, we want A&M to win this game. So since we want A&M to win this game, I think LSU is going to win this game, and I'm going to pick them to win outright, despite being 2.5-point favorites, which means the Aggies will probably win. Just covering all my bases here.
Jake, I think the quarterback battle is very interesting in this game. I think Nussmeier, he's got 2,222 yards passing on the season. I don't really want him to even pass for a single yard for the rest of the year. 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Connor Wingman obviously had a long stretch of games that he was injured for, but the games that he has played hasn't looked particularly great. He has 3 touchdowns on the season, and I believe 2 of those.
4 picks.
And
he has 3 touchdowns, 4 picks.
And I believe 3 of those or 2 of those came against Mizzou in their big game, and he didn't look particularly great in their last game against Mississippi State. A&M's going to have to run the ball in this game, Jake. A&M is going to – if A&M does not run the ball efficiently, they're not going to have any type of success. I think the strength of A&M's team is their front seven on defense. And this LSU team, I believe, as the number 2 offensive line in the country when it comes to sacks allowed. And I think that is a great matchup in favor of LSU. If A&M's defensive line can get pressure on Nussmeier, force him to be a little bit uncomfortable, make some mistakes, and A&M can continually rely on the running game, A&M's got a very good shot of winning this game. I'm not sure they're capable of doing those two things. Give me LSU in this one. I do think it's close. I think actually A&M might cover this game with that, or excuse me, I think LSU wins outright, but I think A&M keeps it within a 2-point game, maybe a 1-point game. I think it's going to be a very close one at the end of this thing when it's all said and done. All right, well, Jake, that is it, man. That is all of our predictions. That's the show for tonight. Again, Texas Longhorns will be taking on the Vanderbilt Commodores. This is an afternoon game. I believe it is a 2:30 kickoff Central Time if you're in the state of Texas. And so we want to thank each and every person. Our immediate reaction show will come immediately following the game as soon as we possibly can. If the game is out of hand, we're going to start recording while the game is still in progress and try to get that thing uploaded as soon as the final whistle hits. And again, we come out with these episodes Tuesday through Friday, each and every single weekday at noon. So like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep these interactions up. Our numbers are looking great, and that's all because of you. So thank you so much for doing everything that you do. Keep liking, keep sharing, keep spreading the word on All In Horns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And as always, for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. Thank you and welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports. All in Sports.